Imagine living with the man of your dreams, thinking you've built a life filled with love and security. But behind closed doors, he's hiding a secret that will leave you breathless and questioning everything you thought you knew about him. Meet Sarah, a wife and mother who seemed to have it all together. A beautiful home, 2 adorable kids, and a loving husband of over a decade. Or so she thought. In this shocking true story, we'll take you on a journey into the heart of deception, revealing the devastating secret that her husband Mike was hiding in plain sight. As Sarah's world crumbles around her, she must confront the darkest corners of her own trust and the lies that have been whispered in her ear for years. But what really happened behind those closed doors? And how will it change everything forever? Sarah and Mike were the picture-perfect couple. They had met in college, fallen deeply in love, and spent their early 20s building a life together. On the surface, they seemed to have it all. A beautiful home, 2 adorable kids, and a strong marriage that was built to last. Their friends would often joke about how Mike was the one who always made sure Sarah felt loved and appreciated. He'd surprise her with flowers on random Tuesdays, cook her favorite meals, and even take care of the household chores without being asked. But as I dug deeper into their story, I discovered that behind this idyllic facade, a dark secret was lurking. One that would change everything forever. At first, Sarah thought Mike's increasing absenteeism was just the result of a grueling project at work. She'd catch glimpses of him typing away on his phone during dinner, or excuse himself to take an urgent call. But as the days went by, these moments became more frequent and longer in duration. She began to feel like she was losing her partner, not just to stress, but to some unknown entity. She tried to brush it off, thinking that maybe Mike was just going through a rough patch, that he'd snap out of it soon. But the nagging feeling persisted. It was as if he was hiding something from her, something big. And yet, whenever she confronted him about it, he'd reassure her with a warm smile and a reassuring hug. As Sarah watched Mike slip further into this mysterious zone, she started to feel like an outsider in their own relationship. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than what he was letting on. Little did she know, the truth was about to unravel at her feet. Sarah had always trusted Mike with her life. They were high school sweethearts who had built a beautiful family together. But lately, she couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. It started with small things. Mysterious phone calls in the middle of the night, hushed conversations on his office phone. At first, Sarah brushed it off as work-related stress, or maybe even a friend's problem. But as the days went by, these incidents piled up, and she began to feel uneasy. She would catch glimpses of him exchanging numbers with people she'd never seen before, or notice him slipping out for business meetings that lasted way too long. Sarah tried to reassure herself that Mike was a good person, but her intuition kept nagging at her. What was he hiding? And why did it feel like he was keeping secrets from her? The not knowing was eating away at her. She felt like a stranger in her own marriage. It was a typical Wednesday evening when Sarah stumbled upon Mike's laptop as he was getting ready for work. She had been helping him tidy up the living room, and in her haste, she must have knocked over his bag. Amidst the scattered documents and receipts, one piece caught her eye. An old court document with a strange case number, and a name she didn't recognize. Sarah's eyes widened as she scanned the text message on Mike's phone. "Meet me at the park at 5 p.m. A name she didn't recognize had sent to him. She felt a punch to her gut, like someone had knocked the air out of her lungs. How could he be meeting someone else? They were supposed to be rebuilding their relationship, getting back on track after the affair. Sarah's mind started racing. Who was this person? A friend from work? A colleague from his job at the nonprofit? She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. How dare he put her through this again? But alongside the anger, there was a creeping sense of confusion and fear. What if this wasn't just about a secret meeting? What if? Sarah's eyes drifted back to the court document on the table, the one with the strange case number and name. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The name on the document, it was the same as the person in the text message. Sarah's eyes blazed with a mix of shock and betrayal as she confronted Mike in their living room. "How could you do this to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mike, usually the epitome of calmness, crumpled under the weight of his secrets. He buried his face in his hands, the sound of ragged sobs echoing through the air. Sarah's heart ached as she watched the man she thought she knew break down before her eyes. "Please," he begged, his voice muffled by his hands. "You have to understand." Sarah shook her head, trying to comprehend the magnitude of what Mike had done. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his words spilling out in a torrent. For years, he had been living a double life, a family hidden from view, children who didn't know him as their father. "I was young," he explained, his eyes filled with tears. "I made mistakes. I thought I could handle it, but it consumed me." Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the gut. The man she trusted most had been leading a secret life, one that included another family, children who called him father. As Mike's confession hung in the air, Sarah knew her world would never be the same. As she walked into that small apartment, Sarah's eyes widened in shock. There, sitting on the couch, was a woman who looked eerily like Mike. Same piercing blue eyes, same charming smile. But it was what came next that left her breathless. The woman stood up, and with a warm hug introduced herself as Karen, Mike's other wife. And then there were the children, 2 young kids who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. They looked so much like their father, yet Sarah had never seen them before. She felt like she'd been punched in the gut, her mind reeling with questions. Why hadn't he told her? How could he keep this from her for so long? The room seemed to spin around her as she tried to process it all. She walked over to Mike, who was standing frozen, his eyes cast downward in shame. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He mumbled something about wanting to protect her, but Sarah knew that wasn't the truth. She saw the look of love and adoration in Karen's eyes, and it cut deep into her heart. Sarah sat in stunned silence, trying to process the weight of Mike's deception. She thought back to all the times he had been working late or out with friends, only now realizing that those excuses were lies. The man she trusted most was a secret father, and it felt like her whole world had been turned upside down. She couldn't help but wonder how many other secrets he had kept from her. Had their friends and family known about Karen? Did they all know what she didn't? As the days went by, Sarah struggled to come to terms with the consequences of Mike's actions. It wasn't just his infidelity that hurt. It was the fact that he had built a whole other life behind her back. She felt betrayed not only by him, but also by those who may have enabled or covered up his behavior. Every smile from a friend, every reassuring hug from a family member now seemed like a facade. As she sat in this dark place, Sarah couldn't help but think about the future. What did it mean for their marriage? For their children's well-being? The thought of Mike being a father to another woman was unbearable. She didn't know if she could ever forgive him, or if she even wanted to. Sarah's mind was reeling as she thought about the impact this revelation would have on their children. She imagined their little faces full of wonder and trust, and felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Had they been living a lie all these years? Were their father's secrets seeping into every moment of their childhood? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She remembered the countless bedtime stories he'd read to them, the soccer games he'd coached, and the family vacations they'd taken together. All those memories now tainted by deceit. What would happen when the kids found out? Would they feel betrayed too? Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as she thought about her daughter's upcoming birthday party. She had planned a beautiful celebration, complete with a princess theme and all their friends. But how could she celebrate without acknowledging the elephant in the room? The father who was now exposed, the lies that had been kept hidden for so long. The more Sarah thought about it, the more she felt like her entire world was crumbling around her. Sarah sat on the couch, staring blankly at the walls that had once held so much joy and laughter. The memories of her wedding day, their first home, and countless family vacations now felt like a distant dream. She couldn't shake off the feeling that she'd been living in a lie. Mike's secret was eating away at her, making it impossible to see him as the man she thought he was. As she looked around their empty apartment, Sarah knew she had to make a decision: stay or leave. The more she weighed her options, the more she felt suffocated by the weight of his deceit. She began to imagine a life without Mike, one where she could be herself, without fear of judgment or rejection. The thought sent a wave of relief washing over her, but it was quickly replaced by anxiety and uncertainty. What would happen to their family? Would Mike try to fight for custody? Sarah's mind was racing with questions. But one thing was clear: she couldn't stay in this marriage any longer. As we'll see in the next section, Sarah's decision sets off a chain of events that will change her life forever. Sarah's world had been shattered into a million pieces. She couldn't believe what she had just discovered. The man she trusted most was not only cheating on her, but he'd also fathered a child with another woman. The thought of him lying to her face, hiding this secret life from her, it just didn't compute. How could someone she loved so much deceive her in such a profound way? The more she thought about it, the angrier and hurt she became. She replayed every conversation, every argument, wondering if there were signs she had missed. Had he ever hinted at another family or child? No, nothing made sense. This was the man who held her hand through tough times, who promised to love her no matter what. The betrayal cut deep. Sarah's mind was a jumble of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. She didn't know how she'd move forward from this point. But as she sat in stunned silence, something inside her began to shift. She realized that she couldn't just focus on the pain. She had to figure out who was responsible for keeping this secret hidden. As Sarah dug deeper into Mike's secret, she began to question the people she trusted most: her friends and family. She wondered if they had any idea what was going on, or if they were just oblivious to his double life. The thought of it made her stomach turn with anger and betrayal. She recalled a time when her best friend, Emily, would often go out of town for work, and Mike would help Sarah pick up groceries from the store. But one day, while browsing through social media, Sarah stumbled upon an old photo of Mike on Emily's vacation trip to Hawaii, 3 years ago. He was posing with a group of people that didn't look familiar, but something about it seemed off. Sarah felt a creeping sense of unease as she realized that her own friends and family might have been complicit in Mike's deception. She thought back to all the times they would drop hints or make innocent-sounding comments about his mysterious past. Now they seemed more like subtle clues, designed to keep his secrets safe. As we'll see in the next section, Sarah will uncover a shocking revelation that will shatter her trust completely. Sarah's world had been turned upside down. She felt like she was living in a nightmare that she couldn't wake up from. The man she trusted most, her partner of 10 years, Mike, had been leading a double life. He had a secret family on the other side of town and 2 children who didn't know their father. Sarah's mind kept replaying all the times they had talked about starting a family together, the conversations they had about being parents. It was like her whole marriage had been a lie. As she navigated this new reality, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if anyone could be trusted. Her friends and family seemed to have known something was off, but no one had said anything. The people who were supposed to support her in times of need had failed her. She felt isolated and alone, like she was drowning in a sea of uncertainty. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as she thought about all the memories they had made together. Were any of them real? Had Mike been acting for her benefit, or was everything just a ruse to keep his secret safe? It's been 6 months since Sarah discovered the truth about Mike's secret family. She thought she'd be over the shock by now, but some days still felt like a punch to the gut. As she navigated this new reality, something shifted inside her. She started to see that she'd spent years building someone else's dream, not hers. Every sacrifice, every compromise, had been for Mike and their fake family. She began to question everything: her education, her career, even her friendships. Sarah started small, taking long walks in the morning, reconnecting with old hobbies like painting. But as time passed, she realized that rebuilding herself was a full-time job. It wasn't just about picking up the pieces. It was about creating something new from scratch. She started attending therapy sessions and joined a support group for women going through similar experiences. She began to see that her worth wasn't defined by Mike's lies or her role in his secret family. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she had a voice, a sense of purpose. As we'll see in the next section, this newfound freedom would take her down a path of self-discovery and healing she never thought possible. As Sarah navigated the darkest period of her life, she began to grasp a profound truth. Healing wasn't about erasing the pain, but about learning to live with it. She'd been so focused on rebuilding her shattered world that she'd neglected her own needs, neglecting the small joys that brought her comfort. Like taking long walks in the park, watching sunsets alone, or simply savoring a cup of coffee without guilt. As I look back, there were so many red flags that I ignored or downplayed throughout our marriage. Mike would often get these distant looks in his eyes, like he was 1,000 miles away. At first, I thought it was just stress from work, but now I wonder if he was thinking about someone else. There were times when he'd receive mysterious phone calls and quickly excuse himself to take them outside. He'd say it was nothing important, that it was just a business call, but the way he'd hang up and come back in with this strange smile on his face made me feel like I was missing something. We'd be out running errands, and he'd get these odd looks at other women. Not flirtatious exactly, but more like admiring? It's hard to explain. And then there were the times when he'd cancel plans at the last minute, saying it was for family reasons. But I never met any of these supposed family members. As we'll see in the next section, I'm starting to realize that maybe I wasn't just a loving wife, but also an enabler. And that realization is both heartbreaking and infuriating. As I sat in therapy, trying to process everything Mike had revealed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in ignoring the signs. There were others who knew about his secret family, people he'd confided in over the years. And not just strangers, friends, colleagues, even our own families. They all knew, and yet they said nothing. It was as if we were all conspiring to keep Mike's secrets safe, to protect him from the consequences of his actions. I remember my best friend, Rachel, would often tell me how great Mike was with his kids at family gatherings. She'd rattle off stories about their vacations, their sports games, and I'd smile and nod along, feeling guilty for not being a part of it all. But what if Rachel had known the truth? What if she'd been more than just an enabler, but also a voice of reason? It's scary to think that we all played a role in Mike's deception. And now, as I try to pick up the pieces of my life, I'm left wondering, what does this mean for me? How do I move forward when I realize that even those closest to me were complicit in his lies? I have to admit, when I first discovered the truth about my husband's secret family, I felt lost, like I was drowning in a sea of emotions. But as I sat there, trying to process everything, I realized something profound. I couldn't fix everyone else. I couldn't make them see reason or change their ways. All I could do was focus on myself. As the dust settled, Sarah found herself slowly adjusting to this new reality. She was no longer living a lie, pretending that everything was fine when in fact her world had been turned upside down. The man she trusted most had shattered that trust, and it took time for her to process the pain and betrayal. At first, every little thing brought back memories of him. A familiar smile, a certain phrase, even a favorite song. But as the days turned into weeks, Sarah began to see things in a different light. She started taking long walks alone, reconnecting with old friends she'd lost touch with, and rediscovering hobbies she'd put on hold. It wasn't easy, but Sarah was determined to create a new normal for herself. She knew it wouldn't be the same life she had before, but it would be authentic, one that reflected who she truly was, not who he wanted her to be. And as she navigated this uncharted territory, Sarah began to realize that she wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was discovering a new sense of purpose and strength within herself. As Sarah looked back on the journey that had brought her to this moment, she knew she wanted to share a message with others who might be struggling to come to terms with their own betrayals. To anyone who's going through what I went through, she said, her voice filled with conviction, I want you to know that you're not alone. Sarah thought about the countless women she'd met in support groups and online forums, their stories mirroring her own in heartbreaking ways. She remembered the tears, the anger, the feelings of shame and guilt. But most of all, she recalled the resilience that had carried them through. Trust yourself, she urged. You are stronger than you think. Sarah spoke from experience, having discovered a newfound sense of purpose and strength within herself. As she shared her message, she smiled softly, a sense of peace settling over her. It was as if she'd finally found the closure she'd been seeking all along. As Sarah sat in her therapist's office, the weight of forgiveness hung heavy on her shoulders. She thought about Mike, the man who had shattered her trust, but also the father of her children. Could she ever truly forgive him for keeping such a monumental secret? The pain still lingered, like an open wound that refused to heal. It's been a year since the truth came out, and Sarah had finally found the strength to start anew. She'd left Mike, taken back her life, and was slowly rebuilding everything she thought she'd lost. As she sat in her cozy home office, surrounded by scribbled notes and half-finished drafts, she felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This was it, the new chapter she'd been searching for. As I look back on this journey, I'm struck by the realization that the man she trusted most was a secret father, to two children she never even knew existed. The pain, the betrayal, the grief, it all still feels like yesterday. But as I reflect on what I've learned, I see how far I've come. I used to be trapped in a web of shame and guilt, wondering what I could have done differently. But now, I know that I'm not defined by his mistakes. As Sarah closes this chapter, she's left with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, but most importantly, liberation. She realizes that the man she trusted most was never truly hers to begin with. But in the midst of heartache, she finds solace in her own strength and resilience. With every breath, she chooses to rise above the pain and create a brighter future for herself. And as she steps into this new chapter, she's reminded that true freedom is not about what we've lost, but about what we're capable of gaining. Thank you for joining me on Sarah's journey. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life relationship drama and inspiring tales of transformation.